The best family trip ever. Last summer, Alex and his family decided to go on a vacation. They had been planning this trip for months, and everyone was excited. This year, they wanted to visit different cities and explore the best places each city had to offer. Alex's mother had done a lot of research to make sure they wouldn't miss any must-see spots, and his father took time off from work to make it the longest vacation they had ever had together. Their first destination was New York City. As soon as they arrived, Alex's father looked out of the taxi window and said,
"New York is the biggest city we'll visit on this trip. It's also one of the most famous cities in the world."
Emma, Alex's younger sister, couldn't take her eyes off the tall buildings and busy streets.
"It's definitely the most crowded place I've ever seen,"
she exclaimed.
"There are more people walking here than anywhere else we've been."
They spent the day walking through Central Park, visiting the Empire State Building, and eating at the city's famous pizza spots. Alex was amazed by how large everything felt.
"This city is huge. I think it's the largest city I've ever been to,"
he said.
"I didn't expect to see so many people in one place."
When they sat down for lunch, Alex thought the pizza was the best food he had tasted on the trip so far.
"New York pizza is the most delicious pizza in the world,"
he said with a big smile. His father agreed.
"I've eaten pizza in a lot of places, but this one is the best. The crust is the crispiest, and the cheese is the most flavorful I've had."
The next day, the family visited Times Square, and Alex felt like he was in a movie.
"This is the brightest place I've ever seen,"
he said, looking at all the lights and billboards. After 3 exciting days in New York, the family traveled to Washington, D.C. Alex wasn't sure if it would be as exciting as New York.
"Do you think Washington, D.C., will be as interesting as New York?"
Alex asked his mother as they packed their bags.
"We'll see,"
she replied thoughtfully.
"It might be less exciting than New York, but it has a lot of history. It's home to some of the most important landmarks in the U.S.
When they arrived, the atmosphere felt completely different. Washington, D.C., was much quieter, and the streets were less crowded. The family visited the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, and several museums. By the end of the day, Alex realized something.
"This is the most educational city I've ever visited,"
he said.
"It's less busy than New York, but I've learned so much today."
Emma agreed.
"It's not as crowded as New York, but it's just as beautiful in its own way. I love all the historic buildings."
They also visited the National Air and Space Museum, where Alex saw some of the largest airplanes and space shuttles he had ever seen.
"These planes are the biggest I've ever stood next to,"
he said in amazement. His father added,
"This is the most impressive collection of aircraft I've seen in any museum."
After a few days of exploring Washington, D.C., the family went to their final destination, Miami. Alex was especially excited because he had never been to a beach before.
"I bet this will be the most relaxing part of our trip,"
he said confidently. When they arrived at the beach, Alex couldn't believe how beautiful it was. The ocean water was the clearest he had ever seen.
"This is the clearest water I've ever swum in,"
he said excitedly. His father nodded in agreement.
"It's also the warmest ocean I've ever felt,"
he added. They spent the whole day on the beach, building sandcastles, swimming, and enjoying the sunshine. Alex's mother, who had been looking forward to the beach the most, was especially happy.
"This is the most relaxing day I've had in a long time,"
she said as she lay on her beach towel, watching the waves. As the sun began to set, the sky turned shades of orange, pink, and purple.
"This is the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen,"
Alex's mother said softly. Everyone agreed, and they stood quietly, watching the sun disappear into the ocean. On the plane ride back home, the family compared the cities they had visited.
"So, which city did you like the most?"
Alex's father asked, curious to hear everyone's opinions. Emma spoke first.
"New York was definitely the most exciting,"
she said.
"I loved all the big buildings and the energy of the city. It felt like there was always something happening.
Alex thought for a moment before replying.
I think Washington, D.C., was the most interesting,
he said.
I learned so much about history, and it wasn't as busy as New York. It was different, but I enjoyed it.
His mother smiled.
Miami was the most relaxing for me,
she said.
Nothing beats sitting on the beach and watching the sunset.
They continued talking about their favorite parts of the trip. Alex's father finally said,
You know, this was the best trip we've ever taken. We saw so many new places, and we didn't spend too much money. I think it was also the longest vacation we've ever had together.
His mother nodded.
It was definitely the most memorable. We made so many great memories, and I can't wait for our next adventure.
As they arrived home, Alex reflected on the trip.
This vacation had a little bit of everything,
he said.
Exciting cities, interesting museums, and relaxing beaches. It really was the best vacation.
Vocabulary. Vacation, noun. Meaning, a period of time when you travel or relax, usually away from work or school. Example, this was the longest vacation we've ever had together. Destination, noun. Meaning, the place where someone is going or where something is being sent. Example, their first destination was New York City. Crowded, adjective. Meaning, full of people, with little space left. Example, it's definitely the most crowded place I've ever seen. Famous, adjective. Meaning, known by many people. Example, it's also one of the most famous cities in the world. Must-see, adjective. Meaning, something that you should definitely see or visit. Example, his mother had done a lot of research to make sure they wouldn't miss any must-see spots. Memorable, adjective. Meaning, worth remembering, easy to remember. Example, it was definitely the most memorable vacation. Energy, noun. Meaning, the lively and active atmosphere of a place. Example, I loved all the big buildings and the energy of the city. Impressive, adjective. Meaning, causing admiration because it is very large, good, or important. Example, this is the most impressive collection of aircraft I've seen in any museum. Sunset, noun. Meaning, the time in the evening when the sun goes down. Example, this is the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Reflect, verb. Meaning, to think carefully about something in the past. Example, as they arrived home, Alex reflected on the trip. Memories, noun. Meaning, things you remember from the past. Example, we made so many great memories, and I can't wait for our next adventure. Adventure, noun. Meaning, an exciting or unusual experience, often involving travel. Example, I can't wait for our next adventure. Relaxing, adjective. Meaning, making you feel calm and not worried. Example, Miami was the most relaxing for me. Research, noun. Meaning, careful study to find and learn information. Example, his mother had done a lot of research to make sure they wouldn't miss any must-see spots. Landmarks, noun. Meaning, well-known buildings or places that have historical, cultural, or geographical significance. Example, it might be less exciting than New York, but it has a lot of history and landmarks. Explore, verb. Meaning, to travel around a place in order to learn more about it. Example, they wanted to visit different cities and explore the best places each city had to offer. Exclaimed, verb. Meaning, to say something suddenly and excitedly. Example, it's definitely the most crowded place I've ever seen, she exclaimed.